You thought love was supposed to feel like freedom. You imagined it like sunlight spilling through an open window. Warm. Unforced. Effortless. Like laughter that echoes in your chest without fear. Like being seen without needing to perform. Like safety without conditions. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The warmth didn't disappear. It hardened. What once felt light now feels heavy. What once felt natural now feels calculated. You notice it in small moments. When your phone stays silent for longer than expected. When their tone sounds slightly different. When plans change without warning. Your body reacts before your mind can catch up. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts race. Your attention narrows. You replay conversations. You analyze wording. You search for meaning where there may be none. And slowly, quietly, something unsettling becomes clear. This doesn't feel like love anymore. It feels like vigilance. Like monitoring. Like holding your breath. And beneath all of it, a question pulses again and again. Am I about to lose them? Somewhere deep inside, you sense the truth. It's uncomfortable. But it's honest. It isn't love you're clinging to now. It's certainty. It's reassurance. It's control. And if hearing that makes you tense, that's okay. Because this isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because what you're experiencing isn't rare. It isn't shameful. And it isn't permanent. Today, we're going to explore why love sometimes turns into control. Why attachment can quietly become a cage. And how understanding your inner patterns can help you reclaim freedom without losing connection. Welcome to the Human Blueprint. Introduction: why this topic matters. Before we go any further, pause. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. If you've ever felt your mood hinge on someone else's attention. If you've ever felt anxious when love wasn't immediately available. If you've ever tried to hold on tighter because you were afraid of losing everything. This space is for you. Not to diagnose you. Not to pathologize you. But to help you understand what's happening beneath the surface. Because when you understand yourself, you stop fighting invisible battles. Love is not meant to feel like survival. It's not meant to feel like something you have to manage constantly. And yet, many people quietly live in relationships that feel like emotional tightropes. Not because they're toxic. Not because they're manipulative. But because their nervous systems are scared. Understanding attachment doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. So if this resonates, consider liking, sharing, or subscribing to the Human Blueprint. Not for growth. For depth. Because self-understanding spreads. ACT 1, the allure of attachment. There is a moment, early in every meaningful connection, when something inside you shifts. It's subtle at first. A change in how you listen. A change in how often your thoughts return to one person. A quiet reorientation of attention. You start noticing details you would have ignored before. The cadence of their voice. The way their expressions change when they talk about something they love. The feeling you get when your name leaves their mouth. This is where attachment begins. Not as obsession. Not as dependence. But as orientation. Your nervous system begins to register this person as relevant. And relevance, in the human brain, is powerful. Long before language, long before culture, survival depended on connection. To attach was to live. To lose attachment was to risk everything. Your body still remembers this. So when someone feels important, your system responds automatically. Dopamine is released, sharpening focus and anticipation. Oxytocin follows, deepening bonding and emotional warmth. Serotonin shifts, influencing mood and stability. This is not romance in the poetic sense. It is biology doing what it evolved to do. You feel energized. Drawn in. More alive. And at this stage, attachment feels beautiful. You want to know them. Not to possess them. but to understand them. You want proximity, conversation, shared moments. There is nothing unhealthy about this. In fact, this is how intimacy forms. But here's where the story quietly splits. Because attachment does not just amplify connection. It amplifies fear. When desire turns into vigilance. At first, your interest feels natural. You enjoy hearing from them. You look forward to seeing them. You feel slightly disappointed when plans change. This is normal. But for some people, the emotional system doesn't stop there. Instead of attachment creating warmth, it begins to create alertness. You don't just enjoy connection. You monitor it. You notice response times. You notice tone shifts. You notice subtle changes in behavior. Not consciously at first. Your body does it before your mind catches up. A delayed message creates a flicker of unease. A shorter reply feels heavier than it should. A missed call lingers longer than logic would suggest. You tell yourself you're just sensitive. Just observant. Just emotionally aware. But beneath that awareness is something else. Uncertainty. And the human nervous system does not like uncertainty when attachment is involved. Because uncertainty feels like danger. The quiet question beneath attachment. At the core of attachment is a simple, ancient question. Am I safe with you? Secure attachment answers this question easily. The system settles. The mind relaxes. But when attachment is anxious, the question never fully resolves. Instead, it loops. Am I safe right now? Am I still important? Am I about to lose this? This is not a conscious thought. It's a sensation. A tightening in the chest. A subtle restlessness. A background hum of alertness. And because the discomfort is internal, the mind looks outward for answers. You start seeking signs. Proof that the connection is intact. Evidence that nothing has changed. Reassurance that you still matter. This is how attachment begins to lean toward control. Not because you want power, but because you want relief. Why proximity starts to feel like security. When anxious attachment is activated, closeness becomes regulation. When they respond quickly, your body relaxes. When they express affection, your nervous system calms. When they are present, you feel grounded. But when they are unavailable, distracted, or distant, even briefly, your system reacts as if something essential is missing. Your mind scrambles to restore equilibrium. You replay conversations. You analyze tone. You question meaning. What did that pause mean? Why did they say it like that? Did I do something wrong? The attachment system is trying to solve a problem. But the problem isn't actually about the other person. It's about self-regulation. Your nervous system has learned, often long ago, that connection equals safety. So when connection feels unstable, safety feels threatened. And the mind, desperate to restore safety, reaches for the most immediate solution it knows. Control. Control before it looks like control. At this stage, control doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like concern. You ask questions that sound reasonable. You want clarity. You want consistency. You might say things like, I just want to understand. I'm not upset, I'm just checking in. I care, that's why I ask. And all of this may be true. But beneath these actions is an unspoken urgency. Please don't disappear. Please don't change. Please don't take the safety I'm feeling away. The attachment system doesn't differentiate between emotional discomfort and actual loss. To it, both feel dangerous. So it pushes you to act. To check. To confirm. To secure. This is where the illusion forms. The illusion that if you can just manage the connection well enough, you can prevent pain. Why this isn't your fault. It's important to say this clearly. If you recognize yourself in this, it does not mean you are broken. It means your nervous system learned to adapt to uncertainty early in life. Many people with anxious attachment grew up in environments where love was inconsistent. Sometimes it was warm. Sometimes it was withdrawn. Sometimes it required performance. Sometimes it came with emotional cost. The child learns a lesson. Connection must be monitored. Love must be maintained. Safety is not guaranteed. So the system stays alert. That alertness doesn't disappear just because you become an adult. It simply finds new targets. Romantic partners. Close friendships. Anyone whose presence begins to matter deeply. Attachment doesn't just attach to people. It attaches to patterns. The slippery shift from love to management. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when love stops being something you experience and starts being something you manage. You don't just feel affection. You strategize around it. You think about timing, tone, frequency. You wonder when to speak and when to stay quiet. When to lean in and when to pull back. Not because you're playing games, but because you're trying to preserve something that feels fragile. This is the paradox of anxious attachment. The more you care, the more afraid you become of caring too much. And that fear begins to shape your behavior. You don't trust love to stay on its own. So you hover. And hovering, over time, changes the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. The first cracks in freedom. At this stage, love doesn't feel painful yet. It feels intense. But intensity is not the same as intimacy. Intensity comes from fear and desire colliding. Intimacy comes from safety and presence. Anxious attachment confuses the two. The highs feel euphoric. The lows feel unbearable. And you begin to associate love with emotional volatility. You might even tell yourself this is what passion feels like. But passion does not require panic. And love does not require vigilance. This is the first quiet warning sign. When love begins to feel like something you must constantly attend to in order to keep. The question that changes everything. Before attachment turns fully into control, there is a question worth noticing. Not asking out loud, but asking inwardly. Do I feel more myself in this connection, or less? Do I feel grounded, or constantly on edge? Do I trust this bond, or am I always bracing for loss? These questions don't demand immediate answers. They demand honesty. Because attachment, at its healthiest, expands you. At its most fearful, it contracts you. And control always begins with contraction. In this first act, nothing has gone wrong yet. No one is toxic. No one is manipulative. What you are seeing is a nervous system doing its best to protect itself. But protection, when driven by fear, can quietly distort love. In the next act, we will look at what happens when attachment crosses the line. When fear no longer stays internal. When it begins shaping behavior. When love slowly turns into control. And how easily it happens, without intention, without malice, without awareness. That is where the real story begins. Act 2, when love becomes control. Control rarely arrives with force. It doesn't announce itself as domination. It doesn't feel cruel or intentional. Most of the time, it feels reasonable. It feels like concern. Like responsibility. Like taking care of something fragile. By the time you recognize it as control, it has already been living quietly inside the relationship for a while. Because control does not begin with power. It begins with fear. The moment fear leaves the body and enters behavior. In the beginning, fear lives internally. You feel it as tension. As restlessness. As a background unease you can't quite explain. But fear is uncomfortable. And the human mind does not like to sit with discomfort for long. So eventually, fear looks for action. It looks for something to do. This is where control starts to take shape. Not as an attempt to dominate another person, but as an attempt to calm yourself. You want certainty. You want predictability. You want assurance that the connection is still intact. And since you can't control how you feel, you begin trying to control what happens. Control disguised as care. At first, it's subtle. You ask more questions. You check in more often. You want to know where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. Each question feels justified. You tell yourself you're just interested. Just involved. Just emotionally available. But notice the underlying tone. There's urgency beneath the curiosity. There's tension beneath the care. The question isn't really, how was your day? The question is, are we still okay? You might not say that out loud, but your nervous system is asking it constantly. Why control feels like safety. Control creates the illusion of safety. If you know where they are, you feel calmer. If you know what they're doing, your mind slows down. If you know who they're with, your imagination doesn't spiral. Information becomes regulation. Knowledge becomes relief. And relief feels like proof that control is working. So the behavior repeats. But here's the problem. Relief from control is temporary. Because the fear underneath never actually resolves. It just waits for the next moment of uncertainty. And uncertainty is inevitable in any real relationship. The shift from connection to surveillance. There is a quiet transition that happens here. You stop simply experiencing the relationship. You start monitoring it. You track response times. You notice changes in patterns. You remember inconsistencies. You replay interactions not to savor them, but to analyze them. Did they seem distracted? Why didn't they respond the same way as usual? Is something changing? Your attention narrows. Instead of being present, you're vigilant. Instead of enjoying closeness, you're guarding against loss. And without realizing it, love begins to feel like work. Control and the fear of powerlessness. At the core of controlling attachment is a deep discomfort with powerlessness. The truth is this. You cannot control whether someone stays. You cannot guarantee that feelings won't change. You cannot eliminate the risk of loss. But anxious attachment does not tolerate this truth well. So it looks for ways around it. If I'm attentive enough. If I'm important enough. If I manage things carefully. Then maybe I can prevent pain. Control becomes a way to negotiate with uncertainty. But uncertainty does not negotiate. How control affects the other person. This is where the dynamic starts to shift in ways you may not intend. Your partner may not feel controlled in obvious ways. They may not feel accused or restricted at first. Instead, they feel pressure. Pressure to respond correctly. Pressure to reassure. Pressure to not trigger your anxiety. They may start adjusting themselves. Choosing words carefully. Avoiding certain topics. Limiting independence to keep the peace. Not because you demanded it, but because the emotional atmosphere encourages it. And slowly, their sense of freedom changes. The invisible contract. Control creates an unspoken agreement. It goes something like this. If you behave in predictable ways, I will feel okay. If you stay close, I won't panic. If you reassure me, I'll relax. But this contract is never stated clearly. And because it's unspoken, it can't be negotiated. Your partner doesn't know exactly what's required. They only know when they've failed. A delayed message. A forgotten detail. An unintentional distance. Suddenly, tension appears. Confusion sets in. And they may not understand why. Jealousy becomes a tool of control. As control deepens, jealousy often intensifies. Not loud jealousy. Quiet jealousy. The kind that lives in glances. In tone shifts. In emotional withdrawal. You notice who they talk to. You notice how they talk. You notice when they seem engaged elsewhere. Your body reacts. Your thoughts sharpen. And control whispers a solution. If I limit the threat, I'll feel safe. This might look like subtle discouragement. Or discomfort expressed indirectly. Or emotional distance used as leverage. Again, not intentionally. but driven by fear. Why control pushes love away? Here's the cruel irony. The behaviors meant to preserve connection slowly erode it. Because love needs space. Not distance. Space. Space to choose. Space to breathe. Space to exist without constant evaluation. When someone feels monitored, they don't feel cherished. They feel watched. When someone feels responsible for another's emotional stability, intimacy becomes burdened. And when love feels heavy, people instinctively pull back. This pulling back then confirms the anxious person's deepest fear. See? I was right to worry. And the cycle tightens. The escalation loop. This is how control escalates without awareness. Fear leads to monitoring. Monitoring leads to tension. Tension leads to distance. Distance leads to more fear. Each step feels justified in isolation. But together, they form a loop. A loop where love is constantly under threat. And because the threat feels external, you don't see that the real source is internal. Control versus boundaries. At this point, it's important to make a distinction. Boundaries are about protecting your inner world. Control is about managing someone else's behavior. Boundaries sound like, I'm not okay with this. I need space right now. This doesn't work for me. Control sounds like, you shouldn't do that. Why would you act like this? If you cared, you wouldn't. Boundaries create clarity. Control creates tension. But when fear is driving you, the line between the two blurs. You think you're advocating for yourself. But you're actually trying to regulate someone else. The emotional cost to you. Living in this state is exhausting. Your mind is always working. Your body is always alert. You rarely feel fully relaxed. Even good moments feel temporary. Even reassurance wears off quickly. You may start questioning yourself. Why am I like this? Why can't I just relax? Why does love feel so hard? Shame creeps in. And shame makes fear worse. Because now, you're afraid not only of losing them, but of being too much. So you oscillate. Cling, then pull back. Speak, then regret. Reach, then withdraw. The emotional whiplash is draining. The critical insight of Act 2. Here is the most important truth of this act. Control is not the cause of fear. It is the symptom. You are not controlling because you are selfish. You are not controlling because you want power. You are controlling because some part of you does not feel safe without certainty. And until that part is addressed, control will keep resurfacing. Not because you choose it, but because fear demands relief. By now, love may feel complicated. Not because the relationship is wrong, but because fear has taken the steering wheel. Attachment has crossed a line. Not into malice, but into management. In the next act, we will look at what this costs. Not just to the relationship, but to you. How controlling attachment erodes self-worth. How it reshapes identity. And how living in constant emotional vigilance slowly drains the life out of love. That is where the weight truly becomes visible. ACT 3, the emotional cost of control. There comes a point when the effort becomes noticeable. Not in one dramatic moment, but in quiet accumulation. You wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. Your mind feels busy even when nothing is happening. Moments of calm feel rare, fragile, easily disrupted. You don't always know why. On the surface, things may look fine. You may still be together. You may still talk every day. You may even still say I love you. But underneath, something is wearing you down. This is the emotional cost of control. Living in a state of emotional vigilance. When attachment turns controlling, your nervous system never truly rests. You are always listening for changes. Always scanning for shifts in tone, energy, availability. Even during good moments, part of you is bracing. You enjoy closeness, but you're also watching it. Measuring it. wondering how long it will last. This creates a subtle but constant tension in the body. Your shoulders stay tight. Your breathing stays shallow. Your thoughts rarely slow completely. This isn't because something is wrong with you. It's because your system believes something could go wrong at any moment. And it wants to be ready. How anxiety becomes the background noise of love. Over time, anxiety stops feeling like a reaction. It becomes the atmosphere. You don't always notice it consciously. But it colors everything. When they're affectionate, you feel relief more than joy. When they're distant, you feel panic more than curiosity. Relief becomes addictive. Each reassuring message calms you temporarily. Each affectionate moment brings a brief sense of safety. But the calm never lasts. Because reassurance treats the symptom, not the cause. So you need it again. And again. And again. This is how love begins to feel like an emotional dependency. Not because the other person is doing something wrong, but because your system is using them as a regulator. The erosion of self-worth. One of the most painful costs of controlling attachment is what it does to your sense of self. Slowly, quietly, your worth starts to feel conditional. You feel good about yourself when the relationship feels stable. You feel inadequate when it doesn't. Your confidence rises and falls based on someone else's behavior. If they're attentive, you feel secure. If they're distracted, you feel replaceable. This is not love enhancing your life. This is love consuming your identity. You may stop asking what you need. You may stop noticing your own desires. You may shrink parts of yourself to avoid conflict or abandonment. Not intentionally, but gradually. Losing yourself without realizing it. This is one of the most dangerous parts. Because it happens quietly. You don't wake up one day and say, "I've lost myself." You just notice that you don't do certain things anymore. You don't speak as freely. You don't take as many emotional risks. You don't feel as connected to your own inner world. Your attention is outward. Focused on maintaining harmony. Preventing distance. Keeping things okay. But okay is not the same as alive. And the more you abandon yourself to preserve the relationship, the emptier the relationship begins to feel. The weight your partner carries. This cost is not yours alone. Even if your partner can't name it, they feel it. They feel the pressure to reassure you. The responsibility to keep you calm. The subtle expectation to manage your emotional state. They may feel guilty for needing space. They may feel anxious about disappointing you. They may start censoring themselves. And over time, this creates resentment. Not because they don't care, but because no one wants to feel responsible for someone else's sense of safety. Love thrives on choice. Resentment grows when choice disappears. Why control creates emotional distance? Ironically, the more you try to prevent distance, the more distance you create. Because emotional closeness requires freedom. It requires the ability to be fully yourself without fear of consequence. When someone feels monitored, even subtly, they don't feel seen. They feel evaluated. An evaluation kills intimacy. So they pull back. They don't always know why. They just know they need space to breathe. This withdrawal then triggers your deepest fear. And the cycle tightens. The internal war. At this stage, you may start fighting yourself. One part of you wants to reach out, to ask for reassurance, to hold tighter. Another part of you knows that doing so may push them away. So you hesitate. You hold things in. You suppress your feelings. You pretend to be okay when you're not. This internal conflict is exhausting. You feel trapped between your fear and your values. And neither side feels safe. When love feels like a test. Eventually, love stops feeling like a refuge. It starts feeling like something you're constantly being graded on. Am I too much today? Am I not enough today? Did I handle that right? Did I ruin something? You replay moments not to understand them, but to judge yourself. This self-surveillance deepens anxiety. And anxiety deepens control. The quiet grief beneath it all. Beneath the fear, beneath the control, beneath the exhaustion. There is grief. Grief for the ease you wish love had. Grief for the version of yourself who felt freer. Grief for the connection you imagine this could be. You don't always let yourself feel this grief, because it feels dangerous. If you admit how heavy this feels, you might have to face truths you're not ready for. So you keep trying. And trying. And trying. This is the cost of control. Not drama. Not explosions. But erosion. The slow wearing away of joy, self-trust, and emotional safety. In the next act, we will turn toward awareness. Because awareness is where the cycle begins to break. Not through force. Not through blame. But through seeing clearly, for the first time, what is actually happening inside you. ACT 4, recognition, seeing the pattern clearly. Nothing changes until it becomes visible. As long as fear feels like reality, and anxiety feels like truth, the cycle continues. Recognition is not a single moment. It's a gradual shift in perspective. A willingness to look inward without judgment. The courage to observe yourself. Recognition begins with observation. Not analysis. Not self-criticism. Observation. You start noticing your reactions as they happen. The tightness in your chest when plans change. The spike of anxiety when messages go unanswered. The urge to check, to ask, to confirm. Instead of acting immediately, you pause. You name what's happening. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling uncertain. I'm feeling unsteady. This naming matters. Because feelings that are named lose their grip. They move from the body into awareness. Separating feelings from facts. One of the most important skills in recognition is learning to separate feelings from facts. Anxious attachment collapses the two. It says, I feel abandoned, therefore I am abandoned. I feel rejected, therefore I am being rejected. Recognition introduces space. It says, I feel anxious, and that doesn't mean something bad is happening. This space is small at first. But it's powerful. Because in that space, choice becomes possible. Identifying triggers without blame. Recognition also means identifying your triggers honestly. Not to shame yourself. Not to eliminate them immediately. But to understand them. Common triggers include delayed communication, changes in routine, perceived emotional distance, ambiguity about plans, interactions with others. These triggers are not weaknesses. They are clues. They point to moments where your system feels unsafe. And safety, not control, is the real need. Looking back without getting stuck. Recognition often brings memories. Past relationships. Early family dynamics. Moments where love felt unpredictable. You may start seeing patterns. How you learn to stay alert. How you learn to monitor closeness. How you learn that connection could disappear suddenly. This is not about blaming the past. It's about understanding how the present is shaped. Because once you see the pattern, you stop mistaking it for destiny. Asking the right questions. Recognition shifts the questions you ask. Instead of, why are they doing this to me? You begin asking, what is this bringing up in me? What am I afraid of losing right now? What does my body believe is happening? These questions turn your attention inward. And inward is where the solution lives. Seeing control as a coping strategy. One of the most liberating recognitions is this. Control is not a character flaw. It is a coping strategy. A strategy that once helped you feel safer. But strategies that once protected you can later limit you. Recognizing this allows compassion. And compassion is what makes change sustainable. The moment the cage cracks. There is often a quiet moment when things shift. Not a breakthrough. Not an epiphany. Just a realization. I don't want to live like this anymore. Not because you want to leave the relationship, but because you want to come back to yourself. This is the beginning of freedom. Recognition doesn't fix everything, but it changes the direction. Instead of trying to control love, you begin learning how to support yourself inside it. In the next act, we will explore healing. Not as perfection, not as becoming fearless, but as learning how to feel safe without holding on so tightly. ACT 5, Healing, Releasing Control Without Losing Love. Recognition opens the door. Healing is what you choose to walk through. And healing does not begin with changing your partner. It begins with changing your relationship to discomfort. This is the hardest part. Because control feels active. Healing feels slow. Control promises immediate relief. Healing asks you to tolerate uncertainty. But healing is the only path that actually leads to freedom. The false promise of control. Before learning how to release control, you have to see what control is really offering you. Control promises safety. It says, if you manage this correctly, you won't get hurt. If you stay alert, you won't be blindsided. If you hold on tightly enough, nothing will slip away. But look honestly. Has control ever actually delivered lasting peace? Or has it only postponed anxiety, only for it to return stronger? Healing begins when you accept this truth. Control reduces anxiety in the short term, but strengthens it in the long term. Because every time control works, your nervous system learns that fear was justified. So it comes back louder next time. Learning to sit with uncertainty. At the center of healing is one skill. The ability to sit with uncertainty without acting. This sounds simple. It is not. When anxious attachment is activated, uncertainty feels unbearable. Your body reacts as if something urgent is happening. Your instinct is to do something. Text. Ask. Check. Confirm. Healing asks you to pause instead. To stay present with the discomfort. To let the wave rise and fall without responding to it. This is how nervous systems relearn safety. Self-regulation, becoming your own anchor. Self-regulation means learning to calm yourself without outsourcing that task to another person. This does not mean you never need reassurance. It means reassurance is no longer your only source of stability. When anxiety rises, start with the body. Slow your breathing. Ground your feet. Relax your jaw. Your body must feel safety before your mind will believe it. Then speak to yourself internally. Not harshly. Not dismissively. But kindly. I'm feeling afraid right now. This feeling will pass. I don't need to act on this. This is not lying to yourself. It's parenting yourself. Why feelings don't require immediate action. One of the most powerful healing insights is this. Feelings are not instructions. Just because you feel anxious does not mean you must act. Just because you feel jealous does not mean something is wrong. Just because you feel afraid does not mean danger is present. Healing is learning to let feelings exist without obeying them. This breaks the automatic loop between emotion and behavior. And over time, the emotions themselves soften. Rebuilding trust with yourself. Control is often a sign that you don't trust yourself to survive loss. Not that you don't trust the other person. Healing involves rebuilding self-trust. Trust that you could handle disappointment. Trust that you could survive change. Trust that you would still be whole if something ended. This doesn't make loss painless. But it makes it less terrifying. Because fear loses its power when you believe in your own resilience. Communicating needs without control. Healing doesn't mean silence. It means clarity without pressure. There is a difference between expressing a need and demanding relief. Control says, fix this so I feel okay. Healing says, this is what I feel. This is what helps. I'm working on my side too. This kind of communication invites connection instead of defensiveness. It allows your partner to respond freely, not under obligation. And that freedom changes everything. Boundaries, where healing becomes visible. As you heal, boundaries become clearer. You stop trying to manage someone else's behavior. You start protecting your own emotional space. Boundaries sound like, I'm not okay with this dynamic. I need to step back when I feel overwhelmed. I want to talk about this, but not when we're both activated. Boundaries don't control. They clarify. And clarity is calming. Grieving the old strategy. Healing also involves grief. Grief for the control you used because it once kept you safe. Grief for the younger version of you who had to stay alert to survive. You don't shame that part of you. You thank it. And then you let it rest. Because you are no longer living in the conditions that created it. Progress is not linear. Healing does not move in a straight line. You will regress sometimes. You will feel old urges resurface. You will have moments where control feels tempting again. This does not mean you are failing. It means you are human. Each time you pause instead of reacting, each time you soothe instead of grasp, you are rewiring your nervous system. This takes time. But it works. Healing is not about becoming detached. It's about becoming anchored. Anchored in yourself. Anchored in awareness. Anchored in the knowledge that love does not need to be managed to exist. In the next act, we will explore what becomes possible when healing takes root. What love feels like when fear is no longer in charge. What secure attachment actually looks like, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. ACT 6, the beauty of secure love. Secure love does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with calm. At first, this calm can feel unfamiliar. Almost boring. Especially if you are used to emotional intensity. But stay with it. Because beneath the calm is something powerful. Stability. What secure love feels like in the body. Secure love feels grounded. Your breathing stays steady. Your thoughts don't spiral as easily. Your body doesn't react to every shift in tone or timing. You don't feel the need to monitor constantly. Not because you don't care, but because you trust the connection. And more importantly, you trust yourself. Freedom without distance. Secure love includes space. Not emotional distance, but room to exist independently. You don't panic when your partner needs time alone. You don't interpret space as rejection. You understand that closeness is not erased by absence. This allows both people to breathe. And breathing keeps love alive. Conflict without collapse. Secure love still has conflict. But conflict doesn't feel catastrophic. Disagreements don't threaten the bond. They become moments of understanding. You don't rush to fix everything immediately. You trust that resolution is possible. This trust prevents escalation. And prevents control from re-entering. Mutual choice instead of obligation. One of the most beautiful shifts in secure love is this. Love feels chosen, not enforced. Affection feels genuine, not required. Presence feels voluntary, not pressured. This restores desire. Because desire cannot exist where obligation dominates. Secure love and individual identity. In secure love, you don't lose yourself. Your interests remain yours. Your emotions remain valid. Your inner world remains important. You don't shrink to maintain connection. You expand within it. And paradoxically, this makes the bond stronger. Trust is a living practice. Trust is not blind faith. It's a daily practice. It's choosing not to assume the worst. It's choosing curiosity over accusation. It's choosing regulation over reaction. Secure love doesn't mean you never feel fear. It means fear no longer dictates your behavior. Why secure love feels less dramatic. Secure love lacks extremes. There are fewer emotional highs. Fewer devastating lows. This can feel unfamiliar at first. But what you gain is peace. And peace allows love to deepen in ways intensity never could. The quiet joy of safety. In secure love, joy feels quieter. But more real. You enjoy moments without scanning for threats. You laugh without bracing for loss. You connect without guarding yourself. This is what safety feels like. Not excitement, but ease. Secure love is not perfection. It is presence without fear. It is connection without control. It is the reward of self-awareness, courage, and patience. In the final acts, we will bring everything together. How to maintain this freedom. How to catch yourself when old patterns return. And how to build relationships that feel like places you can finally rest. ACT 7, maintaining freedom when old patterns try to return. Healing does not mean your old patterns disappear. It means they lose authority. Even after awareness, even after growth, there will be moments when fear resurfaces. Moments when your body reacts faster than your insight. Moments when the urge to control flickers again. This is not failure. This is memory. Your nervous system learned its patterns over years. Sometimes decades. It does not unlearn them overnight. Why old patterns resurface under stress. Old attachment strategies tend to return during moments of stress. Transitions. Conflict. Uncertainty. Loss. When your system feels overwhelmed, it reaches for what once worked. Not because it's best, but because it's familiar. This is why relapse often happens during arguments, emotional distance, major life changes, periods of insecurity. Understanding this prevents shame. You don't say, "Why am I like this again?" You say, "Something feels unsafe. Let me listen." The pause that preserves freedom. The most important skill at this stage is pausing. Not suppressing. Not denying. Pausing. When fear arises, create a gap between impulse and action. Even a few seconds matter. In that gap, ask, "What am I feeling right now? What am I about to do? Will this move me toward connection or control?" This pause protects your progress. Because freedom lives in choice. Learning your early warning signs. As you grow, you begin to recognize your early signals. The slight tightening in your chest. The mental urgency. The impulse to check or confirm. These are not problems. They are indicators. They tell you when your system needs care. Responding early prevents escalation. Replacing control with curiosity. When anxiety returns, curiosity is your ally. Instead of assuming intent, ask questions internally. What story am I telling myself? What evidence do I have? What else could be true? Curiosity loosens certainty. And certainty is what fuels control. Self-compassion is maintenance. You cannot maintain freedom through discipline alone. You need compassion. Speak to yourself as you would to someone you love. Not indulgently, but honestly and kindly. You're scared right now. That makes sense. You don't need to fix anything immediately. Compassion calms the nervous system. And calm sustains change. Choosing repair over perfection. You will make mistakes. You will react sometimes. What matters is repair. Repair sounds like, "I noticed I reacted from fear. I want to talk about it differently. I'm working on this." Repair restores trust, both with others and with yourself. Freedom requires ongoing attention. Freedom is not a destination. It's a practice. You tend it like a garden. You notice weeds early. You nourish what's growing. You don't panic when maintenance is required. This mindset keeps growth sustainable. Old patterns may visit, but they no longer live here. You see them for what they are, messages, not commands. In the next act, we move outward. From the internal to the relational. From personal healing to relational maturity. Because freedom inside you changes how you love others. ACT 8, loving without losing yourself. When control fades, something surprising happens. You don't become distant. You become present. Without fear consuming your attention, you can actually see the person in front of you. Not as a source of safety. Not as a threat. But as a human being. Presence instead of preoccupation. Without constant monitoring, your attention shifts. You listen instead of analyze. You enjoy moments instead of measuring them. You respond instead of react. This presence deepens intimacy. Because intimacy requires attention, not vigilance. Mutual responsibility rebalanced. In healthy love, emotional responsibility is shared. You are responsible for your emotions. They are responsible for theirs. You support each other without carrying each other. This balance prevents resentment and preserves desire. Love is choice, not insurance. When fear recedes, love stops feeling like insurance against loneliness. It becomes a choice. You choose to be here. They choose to be here. And that choice feels meaningful. Because it's not forced. Allowing others to be themselves. Without control, you allow others to be complex. They can have moods. They can have independence. They can have lives beyond you. This does not threaten love. It strengthens it. Because love grows where authenticity is allowed. Receiving love without gripping it. One of the quiet victories of healing is learning to receive love without gripping it. You enjoy affection without needing to secure it. You appreciate closeness without fearing its loss. This makes joy lighter and longer lasting. Redefining security. Security is no longer about predictability. It's about trust. Trust in communication. Trust in resilience. Trust in your ability to navigate uncertainty. This is adult security. And it is earned through inner work. Why love feels simpler now. Not easier, but simpler. Fewer mental gymnastics. Fewer emotional negotiations. More honesty. More clarity. Love stops feeling like something you have to hold together. It becomes something you participate in. The quiet confidence of secure attachment. There is a quiet confidence that emerges here. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to compete for attention. You don't need to manage outcomes. You trust that what belongs with you will meet you freely. This confidence is attractive. Because it's grounded. Loving without losing yourself is not about detachment. It's about integration. You are whole on your own. And you choose connection, not to complete you, but to share yourself. In the final act, we will bring everything together. How to live from this place. How to choose relationships that honor it. And how to remember, again and again, that love is not meant to cage you. This is the landing of the entire journey. ACT 9. Choosing relationships that honor freedom. Healing changes not only how you love. It changes what you recognize as love. When fear no longer drives your attachment, your perception sharpens. You start noticing dynamics you once normalized. You start feeling when something is off, without needing to explain it away. This is discernment. And discernment is one of the quiet gifts of healing. The shift from attraction to alignment. Before healing, attraction often feels urgent. You're drawn to intensity. To unpredictability. To emotional highs and lows. These dynamics feel alive because they mirror your internal state. But once your nervous system settles, intensity loses its appeal. You begin craving alignment instead. Consistency. Clarity. Emotional availability. This doesn't mean passion disappears. It means passion is no longer fueled by anxiety. Recognizing safety without confusing it for boredom. One of the most important adjustments in this stage is learning to trust calm. For many people, calm feels unfamiliar. It doesn't activate adrenaline. It doesn't create obsession. It doesn't demand constant attention. At first, this can feel flat. But calm is not emptiness. It is space. And space allows real intimacy to grow. How secure people show up. As you heal, you begin recognizing secure behavior more clearly. Secure people communicate directly. They don't play games. They don't withhold affection to gain leverage. They are consistent, not perfect, but reliable. They don't disappear during conflict. They don't escalate unnecessarily. They don't make you guess where you stand. This consistency feels grounding, and your body recognizes it. When something doesn't feel right anymore. Healing also sharpens your awareness of misalignment. You notice when someone avoids accountability, when communication feels evasive, when affection feels conditional. And instead of trying to fix it, you pause. You listen to your body. You trust the signal. This is new. Before, fear kept you invested. Now, clarity guides you. Letting go without self-betrayal. One of the deepest shifts happens when you realize this. You no longer have to abandon yourself to keep love. You don't stay where you feel diminished. You don't chase what doesn't meet you. You don't negotiate your worth. Letting go becomes an act of self-respect, not loss. And self-respect changes everything. Love is mutual choice. In healthy relationships, love is mutual choice. Not persuasion. Not endurance. Not self-sacrifice. You choose each other freely. And that freedom keeps desire alive. Because desire cannot exist where obligation dominates. When fear no longer decides. Perhaps the most profound change is this. Fear no longer decides your relationships. It may still appear. But it no longer has the final word. You don't cling because you're afraid of being alone. You don't stay because uncertainty feels unbearable. You choose based on truth. And truth feels lighter than fear. Redefining commitment. Commitment, in this stage, is no longer about endurance. It's about presence. Showing up honestly. Communicating openly. Repairing when things break. Not staying at the cost of yourself. But staying because the connection nourishes both people. The quiet power of self-trust. Self-trust becomes your foundation. You trust your perceptions. You trust your boundaries. You trust your capacity to handle whatever comes. This trust reduces desperation. And desperation is what once drove control. Choosing relationships that honor freedom is not about finding perfect people. It's about choosing dynamics that allow you to remain whole. Where love feels like expansion, not survival. Where connection feels like choice, not captivity. In the final act, we step back and reflect. On the journey you've taken. On what you've learned. And on the truth that remains when everything else falls away. ACT 10, Love Without Chains, the final integration. If there's one truth to carry forward, it is this. Love is not meant to cage you. It is not meant to keep you anxious, vigilant, or afraid. If it does, something else is driving the connection. And that something deserves your attention, not your obedience. Looking back with compassion. As you reflect on your past patterns, resist judgment. You did not cling because you were weak. You did not control because you were selfish. You adapted. You learned to survive emotional uncertainty the only way you knew how. And now, you are learning something new. That takes courage. What you know now. You know that attachment can masquerade as love. You know that fear can disguise itself as care. You know that control promises safety, but delivers confinement. And you know that freedom begins inside you. Love is presence, not possession. Real love does not need to be held tightly. It stays because it wants to. Presence replaces possession. Trust replaces monitoring. Choice replaces fear. This is not naive love. It is mature love. When fear returns, you know what to do. Fear may still appear. But now, you recognize it. You pause. You listen. You respond with awareness instead of reflex. You don't fight fear. You understand it. And understanding dissolves its power. Living from the inside out. your relationships no longer define your worth. They reflect it. You show up whole. You stay curious. You leave when needed, without self-betrayal. This is emotional adulthood. The new definition of security. Security is no longer about guarantees. It's about resilience. Knowing you can love deeply without losing yourself. Knowing you can grieve without collapsing. Knowing you can walk away without disappearing. This is real safety. The quiet freedom of choice. Love, at its healthiest, feels quiet. Not dull, but steady. You don't chase it. You don't manage it. You meet it. And that meeting feels like recognition. If this journey resonated with you, share it. Not to teach, but to connect. Because many people are living inside these patterns without language for them. And language is the beginning of freedom. Subscribe to the Human Blueprint if you want to continue exploring the inner architecture of human behavior, attachment, and healing. Love should not make you smaller. It should not ask you to disappear. It should not require fear to function. When you understand your patterns, when you anchor yourself internally, when you release the need to control, love becomes what it was always meant to be. A place you can rest. A place you can grow. A place you can breathe. Thank you for walking this journey. This is the Human Blueprint.